Thank you, Maggie. Congratulations to the senior class of 2017. You did it. Congratulations to your families as well. It is no small feat raising a child over many years before they graduate from high school and, for all intents and purposes, become an adult. And goodness knows, this isn't some magical moment when you're done, not when whatever's next looms so large. But it's a significant achievement for you, too, which should be noted. Thank you to the senior class for asking me to give a speech. It's an honor that I hope I live up to, and one I fear. If my experience subbing for AP Government that one time a few years ago has taught me anything, I should stick to my strengths. God knows, we only wish Tom had stuck to his. Then again, my strengths, skepticism, art historical analysis, crippling awkwardness, these do not make for great graduation speeches. I don't think you want me to start drawing parallels between Chuck's hands and those of sculptures by Rodin. This is my 8th year at university, which means that, in a way, I've now gone through high school 3 times. I feel this more because I have larger groups of mentees who graduate every 4 years, and so I experience the progression from freshman to senior year more acutely through them. I've become interested in how these last 8 years, not to mention the other 8 after high school and before I came here, have affected my memories and experience of my first run through high school. I'm not sure if you're interested in what high school looks like when one looks back on it after 50-odd years, but we faculty wonder what ours, university, will look like to you. If you know anything about me, you know this is neither a task nor a place that gives me comfort. What does, however, is a fact about my own high school graduation, and perhaps one about many of the families' graduations in the room. I can't remember for the life of me who gave the speeches. I remember it was in our high school's gym. I also remember that we sat on risers facing the audience, as you do now, and that, as she was sitting down, one of my classmates slid her chair too far and fell back off the top riser. It was scary. Many of the people in the audience stood up, and there was a collective gasp. And my friend's dad, who was a doctor, and another man whom I don't know, and was presumably someone else's father, and also probably a doctor, ran to her. Our fright lasted because the risers hid her from view. Few of us up on stage could see her either. It was like something out of a Hitchcock thriller, where the greatest scenes of terror and suspense happen out of the frame, letting your mind do the worst. And then it was embarrassing and heartbreaking, because she thankfully wasn't hurt, but that became known. But it was also clear that she didn't want to stand up and face this thing that she did in front of hundreds of people. Eventually she did, and things went on. People gave the speeches I don't remember. Later, weeks afterward, when I was still young, I saw the humor in her fall. Before you think I'm a horrible person, I wasn't laughing at her or enjoying that it had happened to her. Irony and humor can just as easily be escapes from fully comprehending something as means to process what has happened. And I was doing both in turns, escaping and processing. I also knew that she hadn't been hurt, and that, and the effects of time, softened the malignancy of that situation. I wonder often, sometimes, what she thinks of it. I don't know. I hope she can laugh at it, or that she doesn't think of it at all, that she's not hit with the memory apropos of nothing when she's driving a van of students to school, or teaching Romeo and Juliet to freshmen. I would ask her what it means to her, but I haven't seen or talked to her for 16 years. She wasn't my friend. It was the most memorable thing that happened at my graduation, and part of what I deal with is that it's supplanted pretty much all my other memories of that day. What will be your memories of today, of high school? Will their relative goodness or badness or meaning shift over time? What will fall away? In true English teacher fashion, and Chuck did it already too, I want to read a poem, half of one really, that will frame the remainder of my time up here and present a way to look, that you might look back. It's by a local professor at IU Bloomington named Ross Gay. He's actually slated to give a reading at Butler in the fall, so if you like this bit, you might check him out. I'll be there. We can hang out. Or probably just in the other side of the room. But anyway, the poem's from his most recent book, and it's called A Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. A fitting title for a day such as this, though the poem I'll read is actually called Ode to Buttoning and Unbuttoning My Shirt. It's a somewhat long poem, so I'll read maybe the last half. Here goes. This simplest of joys in this world of spaceships and subatomic this and that, 2, maybe 3 times a day some days, I have the distinct pleasure of slowly untethering the one side from the other, which is like unbuckling a stack of vertebrae with delicacy. For I must only use the tips of my fingers, with which I will one day close my mother's eyes. This is as delicate as we can be in this life, practicing like this, giving the raft of our hands to the clumsy spider, and blowing soft until she lifts her damp heft and crawls off. We practice this, pushing the seed into the earth like this, first in the morning, then at night. We practice sliding the bones home. Ross Gay's speaker practices buttoning his shirt, saving the spider, and planting seeds for more important and impactful moments where delicacy will be necessary, like the closing of his mother's eyes after she has died. The emotional resonance of that image deepens the meaning and effect of the poem by putting into perspective the simplicity and everydayness of the other things, the shirt, the spider, the seeds that he describes. I want you to think for a moment that when you look back on high school, that it was also full of similar kinds of practice. Yours has been as clear and universal as it has been various and individual. You've practiced for college, for adulthood, for a possible career, at what it means to be a man, a woman, or neither, or both, in critical or political thought and argument, in friendship, in romance, in independence, interest, or interestingness. You practice suffering pain and your tolerance of it in government class, dispelling confusion in chemistry, or expanding your vocabulary and linguistic perspective in a foreign language. But there's also an everydayness to high school. The schedules of the days, the taking of notes, the completion of homework, the zipping and unzipping of backpacks, not unlike buttoning a shirt or saving a spider or planting seeds. What's strange and kind of wonderful about the everyday is that we tend to forget it, just as we internalize it. What we remember instead is often that extraordinary thing, a young woman falling off of a riser. But maybe linking the everyday to practice and that to an aspect of life that's so much more important, like when delicacy will matter, as Ross Gay does. Maybe this can remind us what experiences we too often forget and of their importance, ultimately helping us to process and better understand ourselves and our lives. This practice isn't over and doesn't end with high school or college. I try to make that point in my classes sometimes when we talk about why we take English. I'm still practicing my writing and analysis, still working to improve at my chosen craft, just as you are still practicing and will at yours. Maybe all in preparation for moments like this one, which I won't forget and hope that you do. Thank you.